A warship so massive, so powerful, that the world believed nothing could destroy her. She carried armor thicker than a city wall, guns that could hit a target 42 kilometers away, and a crew of over 3,000 men. Japan called her unsinkable. Then one afternoon, she simply disappeared. For 40 years, no one knew where she was. And when they finally found her, 340 meters beneath the ocean, what they discovered was not just a wreck. It was a warning. A warning that the most powerful thing ever built was already obsolete before it ever fired a single shot. Welcome to Deep Sea War Files, the channel where the ocean gives up its secrets, one wreck at a time. Now, before we go any further, and this is important, if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, think of it this way. You know how your grandfather used to say, "Son, never miss a good story"? Well, consider this channel that story, the kind you pull up a chair for, the kind you tell your grandchildren about. So go ahead, press that subscribe button. It won't cost you a single penny, and you won't regret it, not even for a moment. And one more thing, drop a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? Whether you're sitting in Tokyo, London, Karachi, or somewhere nobody's ever heard of, we want to know. This community belongs to all of you. Now, let's begin. In the late 1930s, Japan made a decision that would consume national resources, engineering genius, and human lives on a scale that had never been attempted before in naval history. They would build a battleship, but not just any battleship. They would build the battleship, the last word in naval power. A vessel so dominant, so overwhelming, that no enemy would dare challenge Japan on open water. Her name was Yamato, named after the ancient word for Japan itself. She was more than a warship. She was a statement. A declaration to the world that Japan had arrived, not just as a military power, but as an industrial civilization capable of producing something no other nation on Earth could match. Construction began on November 4, 1937, at Kure Naval Arsenal. From the very first day, the project was wrapped in extraordinary secrecy. Massive canvas screens were erected around the dry dock, blocking any view from the outside. Workers were forbidden from speaking about their work, even to their own families. American reconnaissance aircraft flew overhead regularly, but they saw nothing. Japan was hiding something extraordinary. At 263 meters in length and displacing 72,000 tons at full load, Yamato was physically unlike anything that had ever floated. Her main guns, 9 Type 94. Naval guns with an 18.1-inch bore were the largest artillery ever mounted on a warship. Each shell weighed as much as a small car. Each shot could reach a target 42 kilometers away. Her armor was equally staggering. The belt protecting her vital machinery measured 410 millimeters thick. Her gun turret faces were protected by 650 millimeters of face-hardened steel, thicker than most walls in a modern building. 4 powerful steam turbines pushed her through the water at 27 knots. Japan's finest engineers had spent years perfecting every detail, every rivet, every weld, every calculation. She was commissioned on December 16, 1941, just 8 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And in that moment, the Imperial Japanese Navy truly believed they had changed the course of the war. They believed Yamato was the answer. What they did not yet understand was that they were asking the wrong question entirely. There is a particular kind of tragedy that has no explosion, no dramatic moment, no single point of failure. It is the tragedy of becoming unnecessary. And for Yamato, the most expensive, most powerful, most carefully engineered warship Japan had ever produced, that tragedy began not with a torpedo, but with silence. Operational silence. After her commissioning in December 1941, Yamato was assigned as the flagship of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's combined fleet. On paper, this sounded like destiny. The greatest admiral commanding the greatest battleship. a combination that should have reshaped the Pacific War entirely. But the ocean told a different story. Between August 1942 and May 1943, Yamato spent more than 8 consecutive months anchored at Truk Lagoon, not sailing, not fighting, not firing her legendary guns at any enemy target, simply waiting. Her crew, 3,000 trained men, maintained systems that were never tested in combat. They cleaned guns that were never fired. They practiced drills for battles that never came. The men began calling her Hotel Yamato, not with pride, with frustration. 'Cause while Yamato sat at anchor, the war was being decided somewhere else entirely. Not on the surface of the ocean, but above it. At the Battle of Midway in June 1942, Admiral Yamamoto commanded the entire operation from Yamato's bridge. The fleet's most powerful surface combatant was present. But she remained hundreds of kilometers behind the action, too slow, too large, too vulnerable to risk in the decisive engagement. That day, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers were destroyed by American dive bombers. Yamato's guns fired nothing. The business parallel here is devastating in its clarity. Japan had invested the equivalent of a nation's treasury into building the ultimate competitive asset. And yet, the market had already moved. Carrier-based aviation had fundamentally restructured the rules of naval warfare. Aircraft could now project lethal power 300 kilometers in any direction. Yamato's guns reached 42 kilometers. She had been outranged before the war truly began. This is what historians and strategists now call the irrelevance paradox. It's the moment when an organization's greatest strength becomes its greatest liability, simply because the environment changed. And the organization did not. Yamato was not defeated by an enemy. She was defeated by a shift. And the most dangerous part, Japan's leadership saw the shift happening and chose to build more Yamatos anyway. There is a moment in every failing enterprise when the people in charge face a choice: adapt or double down, acknowledge the reality or protect the narrative, cut the losses, or spend everything defending a position that cannot be held. By April 1945, Japan's military leadership faced exactly that moment, and they chose the worst possible option. They chose to send Yamato to die, not in a calculated strategic strike, not in a mission with measurable objectives or realistic outcomes, but in a gesture, a grand, expensive, irreversible gesture designed not to win a battle, but to demonstrate that Japan had not yet surrendered its pride. Emperor Hirohito himself had asked what the Imperial Navy intended to do about the American invasion of Okinawa. And rather than deliver an honest assessment of a deteriorating strategic situation, Japan's naval planners designed Operation Tengo. The plan was breathtaking in its desperation. Yamato would sail to Okinawa with 1 light cruiser and 8 destroyers. She would beach herself deliberately on the island's coastline. Her massive 18 1-inch guns would then be used as stationary land artillery until she was destroyed, captured, or simply ran out of ammunition. The force was given fuel for one direction only. There was no return voyage planned, no extraction strategy, no contingency, no exit. This was not a military operation. This was an institution consuming its most valuable remaining asset. To avoid admitting failure, on April 6, 1945, Yamato departed on her final voyage. American reconnaissance aircraft spotted the task force almost immediately. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher responded with clinical precision, launching 386 aircraft from Task Force 58 carriers. What followed was not a battle, it was a demolition. Wave after wave of Avengers, Helldivers, and Corsairs systematically targeted Yamato's port side. Torpedo after torpedo struck the same axis of approach, deliberately exploiting a fundamental vulnerability that 650 millimeters of armor plate could do nothing to address. Pi 2:05 p.m. Yamato listed beyond recovery. 18 minutes later, her forward magazines detonated. The explosion rose 6,000 meters into the sky. visible from 200 kilometers away. 2,498 men died. Not because Yamato was weak, but because her leadership had confused spending everything with doing something. The sunk cost had finally sunk the ship. It's 340 meters below the surface of the East China Sea. She had been waiting for 40 years. No ceremonies. No memorials. No official confirmation of where she rested. Just darkness, pressure, and silence while the world above debated her legend and grieved her loss without ever knowing her exact location. For 4 decades, Yamato was everywhere in Japanese memory, and nowhere on any map. Survivors provided approximate coordinates, but the East China Sea is vast, and 1940s navigation was imprecise under the best of circumstances. The wreck could have been anywhere within a search area spanning hundreds of square kilometers. Then, in the early 1980s, Japanese expedition teams began systematic searches using side-scan sonar technology, sweeping the seabed with methodical patience that mirrored the same engineering discipline that had originally built her. In 1985, they found her. Coordinates: 30 degrees, 22 minutes north, 128 degrees, 4 minutes east. What the remotely operated vehicles discovered when they descended into that darkness was not simply a sunken ship. It was a forensic archive. Yamato lay in 2 massive sections, bow and stern, separated by a debris field spanning several square kilometers. Her 18 1-inch gun turrets, unique in all of naval history, were twisted at impossible angles toward the seafloor, but remained positively identifiable. The Imperial chrysanthemum crest, corroded but unmistakable, still marked her bow. Armor plate measurements confirmed by ROV matched construction blueprints exactly. The concentration of torpedo damage along her port side aligned precisely with survivor testimonies. Every piece of evidence told the same story. Not of a ship that was defeated by superior firepower alone, but of an institution that had been structurally compromised long before a single torpedo was ever launched. The debris field itself carried a message that naval architects and business strategists have studied ever since. When an organization fragments, whether a warship or a corporation, the wreckage does not scatter randomly. It scatters along the exact lines of its original weaknesses, the points where design met doctrine, where capability met strategy, where engineering excellence met institutional blindness. Yamato's wreck confirmed what her operational record had already suggested. She was not lost on April 7, 1945. She was lost the moment Japan's leadership chose to optimize for a war that carrier aviation had already made obsolete. The ocean simply made it official. Today, Yamato rests under Japanese government protection as a designated war grave. Salvage is strictly prohibited. Each year, memorial services honor the 2,498 men who remain entombed within her hall. Men who followed orders with discipline and courage, into a mission that strategic clarity should have prevented entirely. Their sacrifice deserves more than remembrance. It deserves a lesson. The lesson is this: the most dangerous competitor an organization will ever face is not the one building better weapons. It is the one rewriting the rules of the battlefield entirely. Japan did not lose Yamato to a stronger battleship. Japan lost Yamato to an enemy that had already moved to a completely different domain of warfare. And the warning that rises from 340 meters of cold, dark water is as relevant today as it was in 1945. Build for the war that is coming, not the one that is already past.